So for our opening words today, we have a sort of a call and response. Ready? You're going to have to say these words if you wish. After I say some words, you're going to say, "You are beloved and you are welcome here." Can you say that with me? You are beloved and you are welcome here. So when I go like this, you say that. You are beloved, you are welcome here. Whether tears have fallen from your eyes this past week or gleeful laughter has spilled out of your smiling mouth, you are beloved and you are welcome here. Whether you are feeling brave or brokenhearted, defiant or defeated, fearsome or fearful, you are beloved and you are welcome here. Whether you have untold stories buried deep inside or stories that have been forced beyond the edges of comfort, you are beloved and you are welcome here. Whether you have made promises, broken promises, or are renewing your promises, you are beloved and you are welcome here. Whatever is in your heart, whatever is on your heart, however it is with your soul in this moment, you are beloved and you are welcome here. In this space of welcome and acceptance, commitment and recommitment, of covenant and connection, come, let us be together. Oh, Wonderbox, how I have missed thee. Do you all know what this is? This is a Wonderbox. If this is your first time or you're newer, this little Wonderbox comes out and it opens our wonder to new learning and to play and imagination. And I wonder what is in the Wonderbox today. So if you are young at heart, or feeling extra spry this morning, come on forward. We're going to just sit here in the front or in a chair if that's more comfortable for you. Good morning. Oh my gosh, look at this. I wonder what is in the Wonderbox this morning. Anyone would like to open the Wonderbox? Yes. Great. Oh, great. You can sit down. Thank you. Oh my gosh, there is so much in here. How much time we have? Okay, great. Did you know that tomorrow is a special day? Yes, 1 week before tax season ends. No, it's actually the total solar eclipse. How many of you are planning to look up with protective eyewear? We have about 100 that we're going to have here. Tell me how this looks. Does this look nice? I can't, but I've been thinking a lot about seeing. All of us have different eyes, different abilities to see the world. And regardless of the ways our eyes work, we all do sense the world around us. What are the most beautiful things you've seen in your life? Anything you've seen? Like, yeah. Friendship. Oh my gosh, raise this child. That's great. Excellent. Anyone else? Any other things you've seen that's really beautiful lately or something? Yeah. Spring. Oh my gosh, I love this. Natural. Yes. The blossoms on the tree. Is there a poet in the house? Excellent. Yep. Kindness. I thought we were just going to say yes. Chubby babies. Oh, wow. Yeah. So we're going to see something slightly different, although maybe a chubby baby is kind of like getting in the way of the little baby behind it, far away in the sun. But I was thinking all the different ways we see. So what happens when we look through these things? What happens when it's not going to blind us? Okay, excellent. And that is going to be such an amazing experience. I remember when we went to see it 7 years ago down in Missouri, Hattie and I and family, it was unbelievable. And I hope tomorrow it's clear skies. But you know, it's not only looking up, but also there's other ways we can see. Anyone know what this is? A magnifying glass, yes. No burning ants, but you can look really close at other things that are not way up in the sky, but are very small. And sometimes we need these kinds of things, because we're not, it's not very far away. It's actually really close, and yet we still need to get to look a little bit closer. And I wonder what this is. Let's see. Oh my gosh, what is this? A mirror. Sometimes we have to look at ourselves, and that gives us an ability to see, kind of remember that when we're looking at the world, we are seeing the world from our own perspective, which might be different. Oh, here's another one I like. What is this? I don't know exactly how this works. What is this called? Quartz. Yes, excellent. A prism. Excellent. A prism is another way to see things, and also, like, when you hold it up to light, it can cast refraction. Thank you. And it also gives you a different way of seeing things, and also multiple things at the same time. You might also have a kaleidoscope or some other things at home, or a microscope. There's so many ways we see the world, and tomorrow is just one of the practices we'll have to see something really beautiful, really kind of once in a lifetime. And the question then is, are there other times in our lives, not just tomorrow, that we can look and see deeply and clearly that which is before us? I hope it is. I hope that's what we practice here today, looking and listening a little bit more closely. So we are now going to sing you out to your time in classes, children and youth. Will you sing with me?
So when Nick told me to write about deep listening, the first thing I thought of was trees, of how the woods always has a message for those of us humble enough to listen, of quieting myself in the forest, finding the place underneath the narcissism of my humanness, where I can listen to the ancient voice of the trees. They may not speak in the same language, but that doesn't mean their stories are any less important. And then I thought, well, actually, deep listening is kind of my bread and butter. It's the key to asking the right questions as a coach or a facilitator, to still my own inner dialogue and agendas and expectations, to really hear what someone else is saying, to move past that pressing need to fix or defend, compare and contrast, evaluate, or even sympathize. You know, it sounds so simple to listen, but it's actually a lot of work to get past all that clatter and the ego circus that lives inside my own mind. I really first learned to listen when I began teaching. When I entered my first classroom at age 27, a brand new rookie high school teacher, I had no idea what I was in for. I came to teaching through an emergency certification program in Kansas City, where I lived, that was put into effect due to a lack of certified teachers in science and technology fields. I had a bachelor's degree in science and a few years of working experience as an environmental engineer, but zero teacher training. I prepared for my first day of teaching at an all-Black inner-city school by reading The First Days of School by Wong and Wong. All you teachers out there might know that book. And by watching Dangerous Minds with Michelle Pfeiffer 3 times. To say that we didn't know what to make of each other, my students and I, would be an understatement. They sized me up one by one as they entered the classroom, taking in my navy blue pantsuit and my plastered on poker face. You know, they told you not to smile before Thanksgiving so that you didn't appear soft. I was committed to playing the role of teacher, poised and confident, but inside I was reeling. I had lesson plans and worksheets, but they didn't seem to care about any of that. I cried a lot those first few weeks. Who was I to think I could teach these kids anything? We seemed so different from each other. We had arrived at that urban classroom via very different paths. We didn't look the same. We didn't even speak the same. But that didn't mean that we couldn't relate to each other's stories. I had to stop teaching and start listening. I had to connect with my students, get to know them, hear their stories, and I had to let them know me. This phrase, deep listening, it's interesting. You know, we all think we know how to listen. Other people speak, my voice is off, and therefore I must be listening, right? And yet we're often paying just as much, if not more, attention to what is going on inside our own heads, our judgments, our plans for response, our solutions, our needs. In order to become an effective teacher, I had to first become an expert listener. I had to connect that gap between us. I had to learn what baggage they carried with them into my classroom, what fears they had about school, or beliefs they had about their own limitations and capabilities. I had to shred all my preconceived ideas about who they were or where they came from. And I had to shed all my comparisons to a movie where a white woman comes into a troubled school of color and saves the day. I had to humble myself enough to listen.
So we have two readings this morning. The first is from a reading called What is Pluralism by Dr. Diana Eck of the Pluralism Project at Harvard University. 4 things. First, pluralism is not diversity alone, but the energetic engagement with diversity. Diversity can and has meant the creation of religious ghettos with little traffic between or among them. Today, religious diversity is a given, but pluralism is not a given. It is an achievement. Mere diversity without real encounter and relationship will yield increasing tensions in our society.
Second, pluralism is not just tolerance, but the active seeking of understanding across lines of difference. Tolerance is a necessary public virtue, but it does not require Christians and Muslims, Hindus, Jews, and ardent secularists to know anything about one another. Tolerance is too thin a foundation for a world of religious difference and proximity. It does nothing to remove our ignorance of one another and leaves in place the stereotypes, the half-truths, the fears that underlie old patterns of division and violence. In the world in which we live today, our ignorance of one another will be increasingly costly.
Third, pluralism is not relativism, but the encounter of commitments. The new paradigm of pluralism does not require us to leave our identities and our commitments behind, for pluralism is the encounter of those commitments. It means holding our deepest differences, even our religious differences, not in isolation, but in relationship to one another.
Fourth, pluralism is based on dialogue. The language of pluralism is that of dialogue and encounter, give and take, criticism and self-criticism. Dialogue means both speaking and listening, and that process reveals both common understandings and real differences. Dialogue does not mean everyone at the table will agree with one another. Pluralism involves the commitment to being at the table with one's commitments.
Our second reading is a poem, a reflection titled With Eyes That See by the Reverend Marta E. Valentine. Looking away from my computer screen, my day becomes suddenly arrested by the glory of the maple tree with its yellow and orange leaves. I see the sun showering it just so. For a moment, it seems to be on fire, the barn beyond it starting to smoke. I laugh, grateful to be halted from mundane things, jolted into the splendor of the natural world. I pause to express my gratitude. Dropping into my heart, I remind myself that even as I behold this splendor, a more spectacular sight, a greater vision of true art is to see other people. Unlike the marbled kind that fill museums, the real art, the kind artists strive to imitate, sits peacefully right next to us or yells in our faces. The real art is in all the shades of skin, all the textures of hair, all the shapes of bodies. Which ones do you notice first? We see what we want to see and accept into our vision of community what is most familiar. But the true exercise in seeing others as works of art in our communities is to look for who is not there and who should be. When we open our eyes and truly see, we become one with the universal living museum that embraces the beauty of all. April is a big month for us here at UUCCI. Tomorrow we have what is for many a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity in seeing a total solar eclipse. This month, we will also conclude our spring sermon series titled Becoming Bridge Builders, which will lead up through the weekend of April 19th to the 21st, that Friday evening and Saturday gathering, which we are calling the Bridge Builders Summit. One could say is years, if not decades, in the making as well. Indeed, as our congregational history illustrates, we have been in the business of bridge building from its founding. We have been on a journey of sharing space with other congregations, lending our own space freely to our interfaith partners, and gradually deepening these relationships through the development of our Interfaith Campus and our programs, especially over the past 10 years. The threshold that is before us is not the beginning of our interfaith journey, but an important milestone, a critical step in our journey, and I want to explain why. You see, like the sun, moon, and earth, this congregation, this community has been rotating in and out of alignment with various commitments over time, various commitments or emphases, visions for the future. Indeed, there have been many moments where the earth has aligned with the moon and sun at once, giving us an awesome experience of life and of our lives together. Just to name a few, we could point to the courageous choice in 1967 to try again to start a UU community in the first place here in Columbus after the previous attempt, the first attempt in 1962, ended abruptly in the tragic deaths of 3 of its founders in a car accident. We could look at the decision to buy your first church building on 11th and Chestnut, to have a space of your own, or when we all moved to the Little White Church on 8th and Franklin, while also at the same time taking the financial leap and hiring your first-time minister in 1988. These were bold decisions that emerged by aligning our rich past with our vital present and our hopeful future. And then, of course, you made perhaps the biggest leap of all to move out to these 6 acres of land and build a home and shape a landscape that would facilitate your continued growth and flourishing as a congregation. And this is exactly what happened. Within a few years, you took the jump to hiring your first full-time minister. How did that happen? You expanded your non-ministerial staffing, you grew the congregation's membership, and you deepened your bonds of fellowship with your interfaith partners. The alignment of your past, present, and future made way for our coming together, for me and Hattie moving here, and for our shared ministry together and in the journey we have been on these past 7 years. I share this story of our journey as a congregation, knowing that there are so many additional stories that give it more detail and life, stories that are only yours to tell, or those who are no longer with us, stories from the 1960s through the 2020s, indeed, stories that are unfolding right now at this very moment in this sanctuary this morning. It matters that we share our stories because that is what is at the heart of our shared humanity and of this community, our stories. Stories are at once cliche and taken for granted. We read, hear, and tell stories every day, probably by the hundreds. And they need not be published on paper or in a book to be a story, to become a story. They need not be published. These are stories as well. Here are some of them. Tell me about your day. Or did you hear about what happened to the coworker? Or I wonder what things my friends are saying behind my back. Or do you think the story you are telling yourself is real? Stories are everywhere. And they only compound with our years of life, with the rise in global connectivity, and most importantly, at the rate in which we choose to recognize them, name them, and share them with others. I've been working in the field of interfaith leadership for over 15 years, and above all of the skills and programs I've honed and offered, nothing is more important than the power of our stories. What I've found is that the power of stories does not come from their delivery, but from their authenticity. Being a good storyteller is not the recipe for deep connections and a vibrant interfaith community. Being a good storyteller is important, but it's not what you need to build connection and community. No, being true to our stories, knowing them at a soul deep level, feeling them and sharing them in a way that is honest and personal is what happens and what opens the door to breaking down the walls that separate us in this life. There are two critical skills or so, probably many more, that will help us in our bridge building as a congregation. The first we discussed earlier during the Wonderbox, that is how we see and sense the world. Now, all of us have different abilities to see. There are many reasons that our eyes may be different, and you are beautiful and sacred no matter how your eyes look or function. We also know that eyes are but one way we sense and experience this world. Most of us see with our eyes, but we can also see with our mind's eye, or through our hearts, or by our hands as well. Furthermore, how close we look, how willing we are to experience the fullness of life, how directly we look before us, is a personal practice, a skill, and a value that we can and do sharpen here at UUCCI. I think I've shared this story with you in the past about the time I went to Hiroshima and Nagasaki to learn about the religious and ethical implications of the atomic bombings at the end of World War II. While there, we met with non-governmental agencies working toward a nuclear-free world while fostering international peace and healing along the way. One of the essential and formative stories in my life as an interfaith leader is meeting Miss Sasamori, a survivor of the atomic bombing in Hiroshima, and who has lived from that day on with a large burn scar over her face. Yet her pain I could not see, no matter how hard I looked. Her anger I could not see, no matter how hard I projected it upon her. Instead, she only had gratitude, love, life, and compassion for the group of 30 college students who traveled across the world to try to make answers out of one of the most inexplicable acts of terror in human history. But here's the thing, I was only able to experience her gratitude or love or life and compassion if I was willing to look beyond my narrow story of what a survivor of an atomic bombing was. I needed to look beyond, to move beyond what might be easy to comprehend, like anger, resentment, and for us, perhaps shame and remorse, and see her and the story she was telling at us as true and real and present right before us. When we encounter difference in human culture, identity, or story, we always have a choice, many choices to make. Will I choose to see the one before me in the authentic and expressive and beautiful reality that they are, extending a bridge in ways, thus between two members of our interdependent web of life? Or will I choose to simplify, to reduce and cut corners, to see to what I see, often out of fear maybe, or prejudice or apathy, and therefore in reality create a wall between us? It's like Moses and the burning bush, the story from Exodus. That is the iconography of my own call to ministry. I have the tattoo to prove it. It is Moses who is at once drawn to view the awesomeness of the burning bush, the theophany that was the divine, literally sparking forth into the world, and also his fear that he felt for the proximity he had to the God of his ancestors. He turned away in fear, despite knowing that while also knowing he was on holy ground. I feel like we are in so many moments of decision making each and every day like that. Will I look? Will I look and sense this world as it is before me, as it longs to be known? Or will I turn away, project, or close my eyes to the bridge manifesting across holy ground? When I chose to see Miss Sasamori in the truth of who she is and the stories of her life, I was able to see that bridge building, even in the face of such horrific loss, that bridge building was possible and longing to be built. I saw such a story of bridge building unfold a few years later when I sat in the common room of a non-governmental agency, this time in Jerusalem, where a group of women, some Israeli, some Palestinian, some Jewish, some Muslim, who spoke of the bridges they have been building across their common stories and experiences with having cancer. This multicultural interfaith support group of women is one of the holiest and fraught grounds in the world, showed that what it meant to see and listen to one another in their grief, through their grief and their fear, and in their strength and hope. Despite the perennial chaos that may ensue in this region of the world, they chose to build bridges, symbols of the world and life that they longed for. And again, they did so in the double threat upon their lives, communities, and homelands from both conflict among people and the medical challenges they were all experiencing together. So these two powerful experiences in my life are among many I have that have taught me the power of stories and the importance of looking, sensing, listening, and connecting across our differences. So now what? Well, each of us has numerous life experiences that have either materialized into stories or remain deep within us, awaiting to be known. The leap from experience to sharing of experience is as wide as it is deep. We get there by bridge building, a series of life skills that are transferable to any obstacle we may face throughout life. Like building bridges in general, but also knowing where to start is where it's difficult. It can be difficult in knowing where to start or how to ensure their stability or sustainability so that they exist over time. Well, thankfully, we have a tremendous holy ground on which we can practice. We are gathered not only at UUCCI, but also upon the Columbus Interfaith Campus. We might not always recognize how unbelievable and awesome such a reality is. In a world of so many walls, we have bridges extending throughout this campus, heart to heart, within our hearts and beyond, congregation to congregation, that can give us glimpses, reminders, and lifelines to the fullness of our human existence. There are five congregations that meet on this interfaith campus. 5. It's almost 2 hands. There is a diversity of theological and cultural identities already within each of those congregations. And so there's an exponential number of bridges that could be built. Here at UUCCI, we come from so many spiritual and religious and philosophical backgrounds. Our identities are too numerous to count. 2 Sundays a month, the Open Mind Zen Buddhist group gathers in the afternoon here for a few hours. About once a month, Sharei Shalom, the Reformed Jewish congregation, gathers as they have been for over a half century with us. The Tree of Knowledge Community Coven, a pagan community, has at least monthly, if not 2 to 3 programs a month that are open to all, that can experience upwards of 50 to 70 people gathered on these grounds. And of course, our Hindu siblings in faith, who have daily programs at the Sri Ganesh Mandir, or the Ganesh Temple. And with all of these manifestations of holy expressions of authenticity and grace, we have as rare an opportunity to witness and nurture such connections and experiences as the alignment of the earth and moon and sun. Correction. We have so many more awesome opportunities for alignment each and every day of our shared precious lives we have here together. It's not 7 years. It's like 7 seconds to turn and connect across lines of difference to align with who we want to be. I'm going to leave you with a framework to begin thinking of your own stories as bridges to beautiful relationships, deeper partnerships, and fantastic futures. Marshall Gans is a community organizer, a lecturer, and strategist who many credit with devising the successful grassroots organizing model of President Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign. Now a senior lecturer at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, Gans's philosophy of organizing, which I would call bridge building, is both simple and yet infinitely nuanced as the stars in the skies or the lives upon this earth. In 2014, I heard him speak at a national gathering of Unitarian Universalist ministers. During his keynote, he taught us the power of stories for connecting people to common causes. He lays out the essence of such stories as 3 parts: the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now. I've shared 2 parts of such a story today. The story of self, Gans explains, answers this question: why you were called to what you have been called to, why you are called to what you have been called to. So for me, I am called to the work of bridge building because of my experiences of pain and heartbreak, such as my experiences in Hiroshima and Israel, Palestine, that also illustrated to me at the same time the resilience and goodness of humanity. Gans says this story invites listeners to connect with the teller. The next part of the story is the story of us. We started with that in a way, speaking of the alignment over decades, with taking bold steps for personal and congregational growth, including seeing beyond ourselves to the beauty of our wider web of existence. Gans says this particular component names shared purposes, goals, and vision of a community or organization. As with the story of us, as with the story of self, the story of us focuses on a challenge, a choice, and an outcome. The story of us, according to Gans, invites other people to be a part of your community. And finally, the story of now. Gans says that the story of now is, quote, the challenge this community now faces, the choices it must make, and the hope to which we can aspire. He goes on to say, quote, a story of now is urgent. It is rooted in the values you celebrated in your story of self and us. And it is of your story of self and us, and a contradiction to those values that requires action. I don't think any of us is unaware. I don't think any is unaware of the challenges we face as a nation and a world in this year, this presidential year, and in the years to come. Rise of white Christian nationalism, or the continued climate collapse, income inequity, and racialized and gender-based violence. With all of these things, our work of bridge building is desperately needed for the journey ahead. Indeed, we are telling a story of the world we wish to create together. This world that emerges beneath our feet. It may emerge when it aligns our past, present, and future to ourself, our community, and to this here and now, right now. Friends, may we know deeply in our hearts that our stories are there already, and they're ready to be named and shared with one another, with our interfaith partners and the world. May we have the courage to see one another, this wisdom to listen to one another, and the steadfast spirit to stay on the bridge. No matter the rainfall or water level, cloud in the sky or a bright sunny day, may it be so. And amen.